Now parents out there, getting a good comic book for your child probably isn't the highest priority that you have in your life right now, as it should be. However, if you do want to find a good comic book that will appeal to your child's young mind and your mind, then you should get Sonic the Hedgehog comics. Now to most people, Sonic the Hedgehog is just a video game character, and back in 1991, that's all he was. And he became instantly super popular. And like many popular franchises in the 80s and 90s, Sonic the Hedgehog had a comic book made about him. Now most comics based on a licensed character, let alone a video game character, only last for a short time. But the Sonic the Hedgehog comics are still going after 20 years. The comic itself has proven to be something much more than just a video game story. It's an epic saga, with lots of characters, lots of amazing plots, fantastic artwork, and a perfect balance between complex and simplistic stories that make it perfect for children and adults alike. Yes, that's right. Sonic the Hedgehog is probably the only comic book out there that can be equally entertaining to both a kindergartner and a full-grown adult. And in our current market today, where comics are either strictly aimed at just children or strictly aimed at just teenagers and adults, that's pretty awesome. But enough simplistic summary. Let's take an in-depth look into why Sonic the Hedgehog comics are way past cool! Now when the Sonic the Hedgehog comic book series first began, there was little material they could adapt from the video games. While the video games were super fun, it was just Sonic runs, Sonic stops robots, and saves the day. So the comic book decided to instead use the elements and story from the upcoming Saturday morning Sonic the Hedgehog TV show. The comic may have been contractually obligated to do this, but it was good that they did, because the Sat AM Sonic the Hedgehog TV show is so flippin' amazing!
He's the fastest thing alive! He's the fastest thing alive!
In the show, the evil Dr. Robotnik isn't just a bad guy who wants to take over Planet Mobius. When the show starts, he's already done it. Within days, he took over most of the planet and left Sonic the Hedgehog and many of his friends as orphans. So the show is instantly not just fighting bad guys, it's about a rebellion trying to overthrow an evil dictator. Plus, with Robotnik constantly polluting the atmosphere, there's also a subtle environmental message here. For the 90s, this was pretty dark and edgy. The characters didn't always win, and they were rarely able to advance their cause of overthrowing Robotnik. But the show balanced things well with Sonic's character. Despite the odds always being against him, Sonic would never give up and maintain a cool, confident attitude. A bit overconfident at times though, but hey, Sonic's a teenager. Plus the show made a perfect balance between being pretty scary and not being too scary. For example, the show is still appropriate for kids in the sense that no one dies and there's no bloody violence. However, in the show, when Robotnik captures people, he turns them into robots, meaning if your loved one was captured by Robotnik, they weren't killed, but seeing them become a mindless slave can be just as traumatizing, like when Sonic at a young age had to watch his uncle get roboticized.
Uncle Chuck! Uncle Chuck!
Yeah, his uncle may not have died, but that was still scary. However, life isn't all bad for Sonic. He also has a girlfriend named Sally Acorn. While they aren't officially going steady because they're busy fighting a war, their little banter made the show a lot more fun to watch.
Hang tight. Sonic, chill. I know what I'm doing. That would be a first. Very funny. Thank you.
So with little material from the video games to work with, the Sonic the Hedgehog comic book series stayed close to the Sat AM show. You could sort of view the comic as telling side adventures that were occurring as the TV show moved forward. Now the comic definitely was intended for just children at first. The comic stories focused on more of the silly things Sonic did. And since the comic was essentially waiting for the TV show to bring in new elements and move the plot forward, all the comic could do was silly stuff on the side. So the TV show continued, and it would bring in new characters, give more background on the world they lived in, and concluded its second season on an awesome cliffhanger. But then, in the greatest mistake in cartoon history, the show got cancelled. And when TV shows get cancelled, the comics that follow them get cancelled as well. But surprisingly, that didn't happen. Whether it's because people turned to the comic as a continuation, or they just liked the Sonic character, the comic didn't end. Without the TV show, the comic was finally able to move the plot and their characters forward. After the comic introduced a bit of their own original drama, they featured Sonic defeating the evil Ivo Robotnik for good. But then, what was the comic book supposed to do? The TV show was over, and for the next several years, no original Sonic games are being produced that the comic book could draw inspiration from. So what the comic did was begin a fantastic era full of original stories. With Sonic for a little while, what we got was more introspective stuff. Sonic, who had spent most of his life fighting a war, wasn't sure how to identify himself without a villain to fight. However, to keep things interesting, Sonic and Tails did eventually go on a little world tour fighting bad guys, while their friends spent time reconstructing their old home city. Meanwhile, Sonic's buddy Knuckles gained his own comic book series, which was full of nearly completely original characters and stories. We learned that Knuckles is actually one in a very long line of great guardians, and that his mortal enemies, the Dark Legion, are actually distant relatives of his. Plus, we learn Knuckles' parents are divorced, and Knuckles spent most of his childhood without his mother. Plus, early on in the comic's run, there's a neat story where Knuckles helps a lost tribe of his people in finding their promised land. The adventure bears some resemblance to the story of Moses, but with Robin Hood mixed in as well. Yeah, I'm serious. The story even ends with similarities to stories of Jesus, with Knuckles walking on water because of his faith. Now that's pretty awesome. The Knuckles comics weren't just fight a new bad guy every week stories. While Knuckles did have his enemies, there was also a lot of different stuff going on in his life, such as Knuckles dealing with political scandals in his home city, dealing with his mom getting remarried, the occasional run-in with Sonic, and there was even a 3-part story about Knuckles going on his first date. And back in the Sonic comics, they too were mixing it up. And I gotta say, starting with this era of the comic, the way emotions were being conveyed by the characters was simply amazing. That's something the comic has actually always done well, even when they weren't telling the best stories. The feelings conveyed by these characters feel so natural and they feel so close to home, it doesn't become too difficult to get so absorbed into these characters' lives. And while some of these more emotional scenes and stories may not be as action-packed as past Sonic stories are, they definitely show intelligent writing and deep topics being discussed. And 5 years into the comic's run, this was a good move. Readers that had been checking out the comic from the beginning were in middle school or maybe even high school now, so it's a pretty nice touch to show complex writing and essentially have the comic book grow up with its readers. Plus, another appeal was since most of these characters had no identifiable race or country of origin, the stories could translate to all types of readers. However, after a couple of years of original material, the comic finally had a new source of inspiration it could draw a story from. A new video game finally came out that was called Sonic Adventure. It definitely changed the look and feel of the Sonic games, and one new thing it did was cutscenes. The video games now had stories, and the comics had to match up with what was going on in those stories. For example, Robotnik was back and he was fighting Sonic. So in the comics, they had to introduce a new Dr. Robotnik. Basically, he came from another reality that was identical to Sonic's, only he defeated his Sonic. So he came to the Prime Zone to fill in a void. Plus, the Sonic Adventure game featured Sonic interacting with humans, so the comic book had to introduce an entire hidden city of humans. So anyway, shortly after the Knuckles comic was sadly cancelled, the Sonic comic did a special adaptation of the Sonic Adventure story. The thing is, the Sonic Adventure story was kinda long, and it took months to adapt the game's story to the comic story. And this means basically they had to pause a lot of their own original ongoing plots. So for the future, the comics came up with a pretty neat compromise for video game adaptations. As new Sonic games came out, the comic would simply show the beginning of the video game story happening, and then just say, play the video game to see what happens next. Basically, this was not done as an advertising gimmick. Rather, it was done so that the comic book could focus on their own original plots, and just acknowledge the video games quietly. Now, at first, this kinda worked. No longer were Sonic the Hedgehog comics simply a licensed title. It became its own saga. There were thrills, romance, betrayals, action, comedy, all sorts of amazing stuff. The thing is, the comics started to become less accessible to some readers. Despite keeping all the characters, the comic book looked and felt nothing like the Sad AM show, the video games, or even the early days of the comics. Like for example, there was a long, ongoing plot where Knuckles was green, Sonic was trapped in space for a while, and Robotnik created a robot son and daughter. Plus, in order to understand what was going on, you had to read every single past issue. Now, on a good note, the comic book did grow up with its now adult readers. The bad note? The comic book was featuring more complex adult situations and was no longer accessible to younger readers. There was an interesting miniseries though that flashed forward into the future where Sonic, Knuckles, and friends were adults now dealing with strictly adult problems such as parenting. Again, great for adults who've grown up with the comic, little fun for children though. Now there was still some good all ages stuff, like when Knuckles reunited with his mother after not seeing her for a year, and then discovers he has a new baby brother, Kneecaps the Echidna. Yeah, that was pretty funny. But then things started to feel too much like a soap opera when it came to character relationships, and it culminated in tragedy when in a fit of rage while arguing, Sally slapped Sonic in the face, and then Sonic yelled at her, and then they basically broke up their engagement to be married, and their relationship altogether. Now, despite bringing in some new video game characters like Shadow and Rouge, the comic book became something that most young readers or video gamers couldn't identify with or understand. But then in 2006, starting with issue 160, the Sonic the Hedgehog comics began a golden age. Under the direction of new head writer Ian Flynn, the comic finally found a perfect balance in more ways than one. More characters and settings from the video games were introduced, but the characters and settings from throughout the comic's history stayed, especially those from the Sad AM show. The stories also found a perfect way to stay balanced between complex and simplistic. Like, for example, there's a story where Tails' parents try to overthrow the current king of the city because they wanted a more democratic government. Meanwhile, Sonic, who sides with the king, fights Tails, who sides with his parents. However, Sonic and Tails eventually stop fighting and become friends again, while the government leaders make their own peace agreements. The story is good for kids because it features some cool action and ends with a nice message of, don't fight with your friends. For the adult readers, though, it gives an interesting scenario that parallels the history of past governments and gives some interesting commentary on what government as a whole should be. And a lot of this great storytelling is brought to the table by artist Tracy Yardley. Basically, it was Yardley that created this perfect art style that balanced the simple and complex look of the comic. The characters themselves don't look super detailed, yet there's a lot to look at in every picture. Plus, the characters don't look too American-inspired or even Japanese-inspired. There's a great balance between both. And that style has been adopted by other frequent artists to the comic, such as Ben Bates, Stephen Butler, Jamal Peppers, and more. Even the villains have gotten a nice balanced treatment. Robotnik is still a threat to the heroes, but he's no longer super creepy scary, especially since he's called by his nickname, Eggman, more often now. He loses most of this time still, but occasionally does still do some serious damage to the heroes. Like in issue 175, when Robotnik actually beats up Sonic, but it's much more than a slugfest story. Robotnik basically insults Sonic the entire time, showing kid readers that words do hurt, and shows the adult readers Sonic going through an intriguing psychological battle. And in issue 200, rather than just have the simple Sonic defeats Robotnik story, Sonic actually destroys Robotnik mentally. Robotnik, who is so confused on how Sonic could impulsively beat his well-calculated plans so well, goes into a complete mental breakdown. And when Sonic sees what he's done, he actually feels guilty about it. Eventually, Robotnik comes to his senses when he realizes that while he may never be able to stop Sonic, chaos is always a constant, and he can use chaos to make Sonic's life miserable. And so in issue 230, after Sonic and Sally get back together, Robotnik does something horrible. He does not kill or wound Sonic, but he kills his spirit by doing the unthinkable. He roboticizes Sally. The one woman that Sonic loves more than anything is turned into a living weapon. But even when things get dark, Sonic the Hedgehog never stops being the greatest hero of all time. He perseveres and continues his ongoing fight against evil. So now, in the present day, the Sonic the Hedgehog comics are now some of the best comics to check out. They're a bit complex, but still simple. They're dark, but still lighthearted. The art is amazingly detailed, but still simple. The comic features elements that worked in the past, but focuses on the future as well. It's its own original thing, but still feels like something that came out of the video games. So if you're a kid and you have money, Sonic the Hedgehog is the best comic book out there to check out. And if you're a parent and you want to buy a comic book for your kid, Sonic the Hedgehog is the best comic book out there for both your child and you to check out. And so that's my in-depth review on what I consider to be the best comic book out there that both children and their parents can enjoy together. Sonic the Hedgehog. Hello everyone, this is Captain Sean, and today I'm here to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog comics. Now, a while back I made a video looking at the first 20 years of the Sonic the Hedgehog comic book franchise, but since then, people have wanted my review and analysis on what happened after the 20th anniversary of the comic. And you know what? I think that's a good idea. What may be recent comic stories to me will be comic book history years from now, thus raising the importance of making such a video. And so here it is, part 2 of my Sonic the Hedgehog comics review and analysis series. Now, 2013 was a strange and chaotic year for the Sonic the Hedgehog comic books being published by Archie, but the highlight of the year was the epic 12-part crossover, Worlds Collide, which featured Sonic's first encounter with his second most popular blue hero in video games, Mega Man. The crossover begins with Mega Man's main enemy, Dr. Wily, getting a hold of a Chaos Emerald that came to his world after an experiment of Eggman's went wrong. This resulted in Eggman and Wily making contact with one another and combining their resources to alter their respective worlds and attack their enemies together. And once it gets going, the crossover features the typical superheroes misunderstanding one another and fighting plot, followed by the heroes working together to save the multiverse plot. Now, a lot of the fun occurs in the story because nearly all of the major characters from both heroes' video games come in, yet somehow the important heroes get the right balance of focus on them. And despite a lot of action, you do get some great talking moments between Sonic and Mega Man, which really highlight the difference in how these two heroes think. And another great thing about this crossover is the art, especially in the final 4 parts. As soon as you open Part 9 of the crossover, which is Sonic the Hedgehog issue 250, you get the most amazing comic book battle scene ever. The artwork by Ben Bates in every panel is beyond excellent and better than anything seen in any comic from both franchises. Let's just say the crossover is extremely epic. Now the story ends with Mega Man restoring his world and cast of characters to their status quo, but while Sonic performs a special version of Chaos Control, which should supposedly restore his reality to normal, Eggman disrupts everything and fires the world restoration process, and pretty much shatters reality. This results in Sonic waking up back in his world, but things have changed. Many supporting characters and locations from throughout his history have been erased or altered due to Eggman shattering reality. Thus, when reality brought itself back together, it sort of repaired itself, but unsuccessfully. And strangely enough, the Sonic comic book universe repaired itself by incorporating the main video game universe into itself to make it a concrete, complete universe again. Now, I won't lie, as a longtime reader, this was a real shock. Although I suppose evil geniuses that wish to alter and shatter reality don't wait for supporting characters and story arcs to reach some point of conclusion. Although before reality was reset, I was glad to see that at least some of the supporting characters had some good final scenes before they unfortunately got erased. Now I'm not going to get into all the behind the scenes details of why this happened, but despite how this change did disrupt a good flow that had been working well for years, in the long run, I think these changes were for the best. By incorporating the main video game universe into the new comic books and trying to start things out fresh again, this allowed the comic books to become more accessible to new audiences, particularly video game audiences. Now new audiences didn't need to buy all the many back issues of the comic to understand what was going on. They just needed to be familiar with the video games. Now yeah, according to the old comic books continuity, many of the past video games did happen, but in the new continuity, they all happened. Except Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Chronicles The Dark Brotherhood, according to Ian Flynn. So now the comic books felt more like a legitimate extension and continuation of the games. The only non-video game elements that were kept from the old continuity were the SatAM characters, such as Sally, Rotor, Antoine, Bunny, and Nicole, and a version of that show's storyline, meaning my favorite Sonic the Hedgehog TV show was still, in a sense, being continued and inspiring the continuing plotlines of the new comic book, alongside the video games. Now, I won't lie, the first story arc featuring the new comic book universe is a bit strange, with Sonic trying to get his friends to remember the old reality, only for them to kind of forget it later. It's all weird. But due to the planet getting literally shaken up by reality resetting itself, the planet breaks apart, resulting in an alternate version of the Sonic Unleashed video game. Yeah, that video game story really is an alternate reality when it comes to this continuity. From here, the comic book goes into a more simplistic feel. From now on, it's a race for the heroes to restore the planet by finding the Chaos Emeralds and other important objects which can bring the planet back to normal. These straightforward stories would be followed in both the Sonic the Hedgehog comic series and the spin-off Sonic Universe comics. These stories weren't the best in the comics history, but they're really not that bad. You do have to give them a little slack though. They were both experimenting with the new status quo, plus they were trying out a lot of new artists at this point. But some of the more notable stories that came out during this time involved Sonic turning into a werehog and Knuckles and Shadow fighting the remnants of the Black Doom alien army. But once the new continuity had been established after the first year and a half, things seemed to finally click with the comic's new status quo. The drama started to get much better, the comedy got crazier, and the artwork became more amazing than ever. For example, there was a great story arc in the Sonic universe called Spark of Life, which featured not just the origins of Sally Acorn's handheld computer Nicole, but a legitimate harsh encounter Nicole has with their creator, along with the classic literary scenario of an artificial being examining their existence. And then came the story arc Champions, starting in Sonic the Hedgehog issue 268. Oh my goodness, this story arc is comedy gold. I have never read a Sonic comic that made me laugh this hard before. The story involves there being a fighting tournament, with the prize being a Chaos Emerald, something the heroes need to save the world. So in order to ensure one of the main heroes gets it, several of them enter the tournament. So after winning a few fights, it results in the inevitable series of battles involving the good guys fighting each other. And it is insanely fun. Newcomer artist Diana Skelly, along with longtime writer Ian Flynn, find a way to stay true to these characters while still portraying them in the goofiest way possible. I think my favorite moment in the entire story arc is when it's Knuckles versus Amy in the fighting tournament, and Knuckles beats up Amy way too hard, causing Sonic to give him this dirty look, and a very confused Knuckles is all like, "But I thought we were fighting?" It's a must-see story. And I think that perfectly captures what the comic has finally become again. Must-see stories which can be enjoyed without knowing about the 20 years of comic book backstory. As long as you're familiar with some of the games, and maybe the Sat AM show, it's very easy to jump into a comic series now. But like the old days, it's still tons of fun for children and adults, meaning there's plenty to enjoy for all audiences. Good drama, good comedy, great artwork, and just a great comic. Be sure to check it out sometime. Hello everyone, this is Captain Sean, and welcome to my continuation of my review and analysis of Sonic the Hedgehog comics. Now in my last two Sonic videos, I analyzed the long-running American Sonic comic books published by Archie Comics. But now I feel like it's important to not forget about the other Sonic comics that have been made since 1991 as well. They too try to create their own take on Sonic and his mythos, and it's fun when you're familiar with one version of Sonic to see many alternative versions of the same character. So today, I'm going to be analyzing the many other comic book versions of Sonic, some well known, and some very few people know about. So here they are. Now the first legitimate Sonic the Hedgehog comic book that was first made was a promotional comic published in North America by Sega of America. The comic gives the supposedly official backstory on the first video game and shows that Sonic was once a small brown talking hedgehog and the evil Dr. Robotnik was once a kind scientist named Dr. Ovi Kintobor. But one day, after Sonic broke the sound barrier, which made him turn blue for some reason, an experiment involving the magical Chaos Emeralds and a rotten egg went wrong and turned Dr. Kintobor into the evil Dr. Robotnik. From there, events happen as they're seen in the first video game. The comic was designed to give the definitive backstory on Sonic the Hedgehog for all the English-speaking countries of the world. Ironically, despite being published in North America, all future Sonic media and promotions in America flat out ignored the backstory of this first comic, and interestingly, the Sonic media teams in Europe embraced this backstory instead. Meanwhile, around the same time, Japan tried to make their own manga series, which was supposedly to be their official backstory of Sonic for Japanese audiences. This backstory involved the evil Eggman trying to take over the world, but standing in his way is Sonic, a rock star with fangs and a strange platoon of friends who has his concert interrupted by Eggman, and so he fights back against him. Now this backstory was apparently closer to what the original Japanese game designers actually wanted Sonic's backstory to be. But the American crew that got involved with the marketing of the game apparently opposed it and played their part in making sure this backstory never made its way into any future part of the Sonic mythos. But Japan wasn't done trying to give a backstory on Sonic yet. In a rarely known of comic book published by Shogakukan Study Magazine in 1992, we get a story that features a little cartoon hedgehog boy, Nicky, who isn't strong enough to stand up to a mean bully. But when he wishes that he was stronger, lightning hits him, and Nicky gains the power to transform, henshin, into the hero Sonic the Hedgehog. And now he is finally strong enough to stop the bullies. Yeah, this comic is weird, but strangely enough, it went on for about 2 years, having various stories being published through the Japanese magazine. It's probably for the best it doesn't get much recognition in Sonic history, though. But I'm actually getting ahead of myself, because back in 1991, the UK had its own first Sonic comic book. Rather than be an origin story, they published Sonic the Hedgehog Yearbook. The book features a couple of stories which just throw you into a world where the evil Robotnik just wants to get Sonic, but he keeps failing. There's nothing remotely complex here. It's really just a Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote cartoon short, with Sonic and Robotnik taking the place of those respective characters. However, in 1993, the UK finally got a more complex Sonic series with Sonic the Comic, a comic book that was published bi-weekly and wound up lasting in print format for about 8 years. The comic at first just published very simple Sonic and Friends Fight Robotnik stories inspired by the first 2 video games, with other stories in the comic being about other Sega video games. However, starting with issue 8, Sonic the Comic chose to give its characters a complex backstory and tighter continuity. Through the use of an extended flashback, Sonic the Comic incorporated the original American promotional comics backstory into its own continuity. The backstory where Sonic was once brown and Robotnik was a scientist that turned evil due to an experiment. After this flashback story, Robotnik takes over the entire planet, so Sonic and his band of friends become freedom fighters on a mission to liberate their planet from Robotnik's tyranny. Despite taking a few pieces of inspiration from the American TV shows, Sonic the Comic is noteworthy to keeping itself much closer to the look and feel of the early Sonic video games, even giving a lot of explanation behind the visuals at specific moments in those early video games. However, the comic eventually wound up going in new directions that were much more different than the games, such as Super Sonic being an evil alter ego for Sonic. You see in this comic, like the stories of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Sonic, when he can't control himself, finds himself turning into a deadly, evil maniac of a villain. Meanwhile, the comic wound up changing Amy Rose into a strong, tomboy-like warrior character, and tremendously expanded upon two of the characters, Porker Lewis and Johnny Lightfoot, with far greater depth than what we got in the original American promotional comic where they were first seen. The comic book wound up going for about 200 issues, filled with tons of character-driven story arcs, fun plot twists, and had some very memorable artwork that stands out as being very distinct from all other versions of the Sonic franchise. The comic has even continued to this day in an online format known as Sonic the Comic Online, which sometimes even gets input from the comic's original artists and writers, such as in the very well done story In Memory, which featured an excellent time travel story in which Sonic encounters a past version of himself. There's a lot that can be said about the many story arcs and characters that inhabited this comic, but it's probably better that you just look up any retrospective resources you can find, or just read the actual comic yourself. Now, after the year 1999 came and the video game Sonic Adventure hit game consoles around the world, there weren't too many new Sonic the Hedgehog comic books showing up. On a side note, the last traditionally animated American Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon, Sonic Underground, never got its own comic, but was featured in the American Sonic comic books for one story only, in which it was established that Sonic Underground was part of a greater Sonic the Hedgehog multiverse. A multiverse that had a cosmic interstate that interconnected every possible version of Sonic the Hedgehog. Some people wonder why the Sonic the comic version of Sonic has never crossed over into this interstate, but American comic writer Ian Flynn has suggested that the insane nature of Super Sonic and STC's reality has pretty much caused the multiversal Cosmic Cops to keep that universe blocked off from everyone for good reason. A couple of years went by, and then in Japan, they tried making yet another Sonic manga called Dash and Spin Super Fast Sonic, and yeah, it's a bizarre comic with humor a little too weird for me. I'd rather ignore it, and since it got cancelled after just 2 books, it's not worth saying much about. Meanwhile, the Japanese anime series Sonic X finally spawned a spin-off comic of its own in 2005, also titled Sonic X. The comic simply featured new stories featuring the characters and settings of the Sonic X TV show during its second season. Since it couldn't advance the story of the anime or the characters, the comic pretty much just told silly standalone stories for a young audience. But they aren't that bad. One fun 2-part story in the comic features Sonic and friends being put into a virtual reality that is identical to the first video game. Plus, another fun story involves clones of Sonic being made that all represent the different colors of the rainbow, with one bonus clone looking like Sonic's original video game self. The comic ended at issue 40, with a crossover story that involved Shadow and Metal Sonic coming over from the main American Sonic comic as part of a multi-universe spanning story arc involving that continuity. Thus, Sonic X was fully established as being part of the true Sonic the Hedgehog multiverse. However, the nature of what still exists in this multiverse was brought into question in 2013, when during the end of the special comic book crossover between Sonic and Mega Man, while Sonic is trying to help restore the reality of his altered world, Eggman disrupts everything and fires the world restoration process, and pretty much shatters reality. Now, even though the main American comic book world of Sonic is restored by incorporating the main video game universe into itself to make it a complete, concrete universe again, it's eventually revealed that the Sonic the Hedgehog multiverse as a whole collapsed. Now, it isn't specified if every reality featuring a version of Sonic has been destroyed. I mean, I think it's safe to say that most of the TV show universes and a few others are still intact. However, it's unknown if all the comic book worlds I previously mentioned still count as being part of the canon Sonic multiverse. However, in the place of the official multiverse that used to be filled to the brink with many versions of Sonic, it seems to have opened Sonic up to instead be part of a greater video game multiverse, allowing the few versions of Sonic left the opportunity to cross over with other video game franchises' universes, which has resulted in the opportunity for a very big crossover spanning many video game titles. but we'll look into that in the next video. Hello everyone, this is Captain Sean, and welcome to the continuation of my review and analysis of Sonic the Hedgehog comics. Now in my last two videos I specified that events in recent years of the Sonic comics has resulted in Sonic the Hedgehog being less so confined to his own multiverse, and has been allowed to be part of a greater video game multiverse. And the one video game universe that Sonic's world has had the most contact with over the years is the Mega Man universe, or more specifically, the Mega Man comics. And since the Mega Man comics have pretty much had their story arcs become more interconnected with Sonic's story arcs, I think we should examine the Mega Man comics for a bit before getting back to Sonic. The Mega Man comics that are published by Archie started in 2011, and the first 4 issues do an amazing job at giving us a superhero origin story that differs from standard American superhero comics. It's full of great artwork and great writing, full of deep concepts that both children and adults can relate to. The problem with starting off the first story arc so good though is that what follows isn't as high quality. Oh, it's not bad at all, but the stories only seem to work well if you're already a fan of the video games or of a younger audience, of which I am neither. However, I will admit, the quality does get better with time. Now, the Mega Man comics continuity got muddled a little bit when the first crossover with Sonic, Worlds Collide, came along. Due to both Eggman and Wily altering the laws of space and time through the use of a Chaos Emerald, Mega Man's reality is changed to be that of the future. Thus, this crossover in the Mega Man timeline takes place after the final Mega Man video game, but still a very long time before the first Mega Man X video game. Now at the end of the Worlds Collide story, Sonic's world went through some massive changes as I already said, but Mega Man's world went back to the status quo. However, even though Mega Man's comic continued as if the crossover never happened, the fact was the crossover was still destined to happen in Mega Man's future, meaning that Mega Man's world and timeline now had opened up a loose connection to Sonic's world and his timeline. This connection was fully explored in 2015 when the super epic crossover Worlds Unite occurred. The crossover story begins by jumping 100 years into the future era of Mega Man X, and this story takes place in Mega Man's world after Worlds Collide definitely happened, meaning there is some record and possible evidence that exists on how to get to Sonic's world now. So Mega Man X's main enemy, Sigma, uses that knowledge to travel through time and space to the present day of Sonic's world, and forces Eggman to assist them in his evil plans. However, as Sigma begins to open tears through time and space, it allows heroes from multiple universes and times to unite. It allows heroes from Sonic's world, some of the supporting cast from the world of Sonic Boom, the heroes of Mega Man X, and even the heroes from the current era of the Mega Man comic to show up. Yes, Mega Man meets Sonic in the present before the past Sonic meets Mega Man in the future. Yeah, wibbly wobbly timey wimey. However, the evil Sigma reveals that he doesn't just want to destroy Sonic and Mega Man's world, but also establishes connections with other worlds in the greater video game multiverse that he wishes to destroy as well. And this results in the best part of the Worlds Unite storyline, in which Sonic and Mega Man also team up with the heroes of Street Fighter, Alex Kidd, Nights into Dreams, Skies of Arcadia, and so many more. This results in part 11 of the crossover, Sonic the Hedgehog issue 275, which involves a huge army of video game heroes fighting an army of evil robots. Yeah, this story is jam-packed with perhaps one too many characters, but it's still a ton of fun. No other comic book out there can claim it got this many franchises mixed into one story. It's a fan's dream come true. Now the end of the crossover involves an alteration to the timeline, which results in nearly everyone getting their memories erased, meaning that the heroes continue after the crossover like nothing happened. However, the villains actually remember the crossover for the most part, and it launches subplots involving the villains in their respective comics. And so, the comics continued. Or some of them actually didn't. Yeah, sadly, a little while after the epic crossover story, in 2015, the Mega Man comics were officially put on hiatus, for incompletely explained reasons. Which is a shame because the quality of the writing and artwork finally got really good and very thought-provoking near the end. However, it is established that the Mega Man comic book universe is meant to be the same as the Mega Man video game universe, so I suppose this just means that playing the video games allows you to see what happens next in the story. Meanwhile, an additional Sonic comic I barely mentioned before this moment, Sonic Boom, ended in 2015 as well, after just 11 issues. The comic was okay for the most part. It was a goofy comic set in the world of the Sonic Boom video games and the Sonic Boom TV show. And when I say goofy comic, I mean really goofy. Like, they broke the fourth wall and talked to the readers almost all of the time. It wasn't bad, but I don't know, it wasn't that good. Until the last issue where they finally seemed to have some legitimately very funny jokes and really played with breaking the fourth wall well. But, comic was cancelled, too late to make that series work. While it is a shame that Mega Man and Sonic Boom ended, at least the Sonic comics are still where they've always been. Great stories featuring awesome heroes fighting against evil. And even if Sonic doesn't get a chance to interact with people from the Sonic Boom world again, or can't team up with Mega Man anymore, he'll still continue to be one of the most way past cool heroes ever.
Compromise does not exist.